Sometimes we face situations where we want to convey a message to someone, but we can't directly say it. That's why in this video, you're going to learn 5 advanced communication skills from the book How to Win Friends and Influence People that will help you in the following situations. What happens when you find out that someone made a big mistake, but you can't directly point it out? How to get someone to do something you want them to do without it seeming like an order. How to get someone to agree with your idea. How to get people to do something they don't want to do. And how to correct bad behavior. So let's get started with the first one. Charles Schwab was passing through one of his steel mills one day at noon when he came across some of his employees smoking. Now immediately above their heads was a sign that said no smoking. Now Charles Schwab could have done what any other person would have done in his situation, and he could have screamed at them and said, "Can't you read? It literally says above your head to not smoke." But he did not do that. Instead, he walked over to the men, handed each one of them a cigar and said, "I'll appreciate it, boys, if you smoke these outside." Now the employees knew that they'd broken a rule, and they also admired him because he said nothing about it and gave them a little present and made them feel important. Notice how in a very subtle way, Charles Schwab pointed out their mistake without making them feel embarrassed. Also, many people begin their criticism with sincere praise, followed by the word "but", and then they end in a critical statement. For example, a parent might say to their child that, "Hey Johnny, we're really proud of you for getting good grades, but if you had worked harder on your algebra, the grades would have been even better." Now the problem with this is that when the child hears the word "but", everything you say after that is invalidated in his mind. So instead of saying "but", you should say "and". You should say, "Hey Johnny, we're very proud of you that you raised your grades this term, and if you had worked harder on your algebra, the results would have been even better." Now why does this work better? That's because it validates the hard work that the child is putting in, and it also encourages him to do better. We also have another example in the book of Marge Jacob, who was a lady living in Rhode Island. She had some construction work going on in her house, and her problem was that the construction workers were very sloppy and they did not clean up after themselves. However, they were doing a stellar job in everything else, they just weren't cleaning up after themselves. So she didn't want to antagonize them because she wanted them to continue to do the good job they were doing. She just wanted to signal to them in a subtle way that they should clean up after themselves. So one day after the workers left, she collected all the debris and put it neatly in one corner. The following morning, when the workers came back, she told them that, "I'm really pleased with the way you cleaned the lawn last night. It's really nice and clean, and I'm very glad you guys did that." Now, of course, the workers knew that they did not actually do that, but they didn't know who did it, and they didn't want to disappoint her in the coming days. So after hearing that, they made sure to clean up after themselves every single day. Realize that when you point out people's mistakes indirectly like this, you give them the chance to not be embarrassed. However, if you point out their mistakes directly, they might resent you for doing that, and they may not even listen to what you're saying. Now the next point is, how do you get someone to do something you want them to do without giving an order? The resentment caused by a brash order may last a very long time. In the book we have an example of Dan Santarelli, who was a teacher at a vocational school, and he told that in one of his classes, one of the students had blocked the entrance to the school by parking illegally at the entrance. Now one of the other instructors in the school stormed into the room and asked in a very brash tone, "Whose car is blocking the driveway? Move that car right now, or I'll wrap a chain around it and drag it out of here." Now of course, the student who did that was wrong, and they should not have parked illegally at the entrance. But from that day onwards, none of the students liked that instructor simply because of his tone. Now, he could have done that in a much different way. He could have come in and asked in a friendly way, "Whose red car is it that's parked at the entrance?" and then suggested very politely that if that person moved their car, everyone would be able to get in and out much quicker. Asking questions not only makes an order more palatable, it often stimulates the creativity of the people whom you ask that question to. People are more likely to accept an order if they had a part in the decision-making process. We have an example of Ian McDonald from South Africa, who was the general manager of a small manufacturing plant. Now one day he had got a big order, and there was no way he would be able to fulfill the order if his employees kept going at the pace that they were going. Now instead of pushing his people to accelerate their work and giving them orders, he called everybody together and explained the situation to them. He told them how much it would mean to the company if they fulfilled this order in time, and then he asked for their opinion. He asked them a question: how do you think we can handle this order so that we can fulfill it in time? Now, the employees started coming up with many ideas, and all of them approached it with a "we can do it" attitude, and the order was accepted and fulfilled in time. Now the next point is, how do you get someone to agree to your idea? Let's take the example of Eugene Wesson. He'd lost thousands of dollars in commissions before he learned this truth. Mr. Wesson was an artist and he sold his designs for stylists and textile manufacturers in New York. Now Mr. Wesson was trying to sell to one of the leading stylists in New York, but whenever he would go to him, that stylist would always look at his designs and tell them that, "Hey, I'm not going to buy from you today." Now he went to this guy 150 times, and all 150 times he got a no from that stylist. So one day he tried a new approach. Now he took half a dozen unfinished designs and he took them to the stylist. He asked him, "Hey, if you had to complete these designs, how would you complete them? Please tell me how I could finish them up in a way that you would actually use them." Now the buyer took about 3 days to look at the sketches, and when Mr. Wesson came back to him, the stylist gave him a lot of ideas. Mr. Wesson worked on those ideas and ultimately he ended up selling all the designs to that stylist. In fact, he started getting regular orders from that client. This worked because once the stylist started giving his own ideas to Mr. Wesson, the stylist actually became invested in those designs. To the stylist, it just felt like he was going to buy his own designs. Of course, everybody likes their own ideas, and if you can make people feel like they're buying their own ideas, you will be able to sell to them much easier. Now the next point is, how do you get people to do something they don't want to do? Al Smith, who was the governor of New York, was having a very big problem. Sing Sing, which was at the time one of the most notorious prisons, was without a warden. Scandals had been sweeping through the prison and there were many rumors about it. A strong warden was needed for the job. So the governor decided to send for Louis E. Laws of New Hampton. He asked the man, "How about taking charge of Sing Sing? They need a man up there with experience." Now Laws was flabbergasted. He knew the dangers of Sing Sing and he knew that it was a political appointment and he didn't want to take all of that muck onto himself. And there were many risks for his career to consider, so he wasn't really sure what he was going to do. Now before Laws even gave him an answer, the governor said to him without hesitation, "Hey man, look, I don't blame you for being scared. It's a very tough job. It takes a very big person with a lot of experience to go up there and stay. So if you don't like it, it's not a big deal." Now notice what he did here. He actually threw down a challenge for Mr. Laws. So of course Mr. Law didn't want to be a small man, so he accepted the job. He went and he stayed, and he went on to become the most famous warden of his time. His book 20,000 Years in Sing Sing sold hundreds of thousands of copies. So what we learn here is that everyone loves to be able to prove themselves. We love a good challenge. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you want to get people to do something, figure out a way to make it seem like a challenge. And the last point is, how do you correct bad behavior? Dr. Martin Fitzhugh, who was a dentist in Dublin, was shocked when one of his patients pointed out to him that the metal cup holder she was supposed to use to rinse her mouth was not very clean. Now Dr. Fitzhugh immediately figured out that he had to talk to his cleaning lady about this, but he did not want to seem rude while doing it because she was doing a good job otherwise. So he wrote a letter to her, and here's what he said. He said that, "I see you so seldom and I'd like to thank you for the wonderful job that you've been doing so far. I know that you don't have a lot of time when you're cleaning things, so the next time you're in here to clean, please try and pay attention to the smaller things like the small metal container and things like that, so that everything is completely clean and pristine. I know this might take a little bit of an extra time, so I'm willing to pay you for any extra time that is required." Now the next day when he came back, he found that everything, including the metal container and things that he didn't even think of pointing out, were cleaned. The easiest way to correct bad behavior is to act as if the person already has a good reputation. Now this might seem a little bit weird because you might be thinking that if I praise the other person, they're not going to change. They're going to think, well, I don't need to change. However, there is deeper psychology at play here. When someone hears that you think that they have a good reputation about something, now they have something to lose. They don't want to lose this good image you have of them in their mind. However, if you start off by saying that I know you're a bad person and you have all these problems, and you start listing out all of their faults, then they will think to themselves, well, if this person already thinks all these negative things about me, what do I have to gain by changing myself? So in summary, when you find out that someone's made a big mistake, you don't have to directly point it out, you can call attention to their mistakes indirectly. To get someone to do something without making it seem like an order, you should ask them questions instead of giving an order. To get someone to agree with your idea, make them feel like that idea was their own. To get someone to do something they don't want to do, throw down a challenge. And to correct bad behavior, give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Now all these tips were from the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, and this is just a short summary of it. I've made an entire playlist of the whole book and you can click right here to check it out. Do keep in mind that I sounded a lot different back then than I do right now. Subscribe for more self-improvement videos if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.